So here's my newsroom list. I want to display an ad link for something at the bottom. If I click it, I get the same thing. And what I want to do instead is show something else. So here's where we add a little bit of interactivity to our single page. You could add single pages for all of these if you want it to be very, keep as much of the presentation out of it as possible, but that's not always. That's definitely things we do in the dashboard a lot of the times, but that's not always the most practical way of developing. So now we've got something new happening, and I'll explain it. If we come to /newsroom, we run the view method, and there's no controller method running other than view, we get this portion of our single page. If we click this, we run the add controller, and which doesn't do anything behind the scenes yet except exist because it has to. And then here we get inside this if statement. This is the form. And now we can create a form. I'll go through this in a second. So now I have a super rudimentary form on my, I have a very rudimentary form here. And you'll notice I've given it my method in my, my action in my form is another concrete5 function. This is, the name of this function is action. This is a lot like URL, although it assumes you are posting back to the current page. That's really all it does. So if I submit this form, you're going to see the URL change to newsroom/save. Unfortunately, I have not created a save method yet, so I'm going to get the same 404 that I got before. So this is very, very basic, but if I type in a name here and click submit, you can see how this works. So I'm now submitting to the save function. The save function looks into the current post using a special controller method called post. You could also just use the PHP post array, but there are times when post is not exactly name for name the same as the post array, so it's usually best from within a controller context to use this, the post method in the controller object. And here we are printing out the name from this form, and we are exiting. But we could also just as easily, change that. Just as easily change something in the database. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with something a little bit less hypothetical than what we're doing now. I'm going to show how controllers can interact with a user object and how you can use user object to store custom attributes and and how that all works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to create a completely new single page and controller just so we can work on this together. My single page I'm going to call my favorite color, and that's what we have here. I'm going to add my single page. I do that by going into the single pages section. My underscore favorite underscore color. Let's say I don't really like that name for I like that name for the URL, but I don't really like it for the name of the page that shows up in the site. So I'm going to change this. Since it's a page, I can change it completely through the site. Choose your favorite color with an exclamation point. You'll notice that changes completely in the site, but it's still my favorite color up here. I'm going to create a controller for this at my underscore favorite underscore color.php up here. I'm going to clear out all these methods. And now I have to name my controller. My favorite color. Notice the capitalization. Controller extends controller. So now I've got my single page. I've got my view method, even though I may not need anything in it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for my logged in user account, I'm logged in as the admin right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a custom attribute which will be stored against a user account, which will let a user specify what their favorite color is, and it will be savable through my single page and attached to a user object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my attributes section of the members section of the site. If you haven't played at all with with attributes, they're very powerful. They're usable against pages, files, and users. In general, what I'm going to do here today for users is fairly portable to other objects like pages and files. I'm going to call this a text attribute, even though that's not the best. That's not really the best attribute type to use. I'm going to just call it a text attribute. Favorite underscore color. Handle is important to remember. Name is what it will look like in the site. And then since this is a user attribute, if you're using concrete5 as a sort of social platform, we have some options for that, but we're not really going to worry about those. All you need really is the stuff at the top. So now I have favorite color as a user attribute. If I go into the users in my site, you can see favorite color shows up down here. So I can type in red if I wanted, delete it, etc. But we're not really interested in using the built-in UI to change this. We're trying to change this to the single page, a custom interface in your site. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a form. When we submit this, we're going to want it to call an action named update color. And then we are going to want to have a text field. type blue here. Notice it submits to my favorite color. It calls update color function. Get a 404 because I haven't yet defined my update color function. Okay, now I have the methods built out. Let's put code in place that will display the color that is currently attached to the logged in user. That's what we're going to do here. This line of code will always get you the user object for the logged in user. If a user is not logged in, they'll still get a user object. They just won't have any data associated with it, and is registered will return false. So we can do this. This line of code basically transforms the user object into the user info object. Because we need the user object in so many spots in concrete5, the user object itself is fairly lightweight, all things considered. It basically just stores groups against the logged in user and whether the user is logged in or not. But the user info object can get all the data associated with the user account, including attributes. So that's why we want to get the user info object for the currently logged in user. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's go back to my members section of the site. And let's save a favorite color just to make sure that this all works. Blue. If I head back to my favorite color, still blank, color. My next line here, I'm getting the color for the current user info object. You'll notice I'm calling a function called getUserFavoriteColor. Well, that method doesn't actually exist in the user info object. What it does is there's magic methods for the user info object, which anytime it finds, anytime a method is run that doesn't exist that starts with getUser, get lowercase user, the uppercase U, it will look at the text after it, and it will lowercase that and any sort of camel case, so mixed case in the middle of the method that it finds, it will put it'll put an underscore next to it. So this translates to an attribute with the handle favorite underscore color, and it will return the data. So now I can set a variable called favorite color, called color here, and I can just make this favorite color. And if I refresh, blue shows up right there. Super simple. Now you'll notice if I hit save here and update color comes, I all of a sudden don't have any color showing up in there. That's because all of this functionality is running only when the page doesn't run any other controller methods. So what I would have to do here is put view. However, sometimes there's stuff that runs in view that you don't want to run in update color. So you find yourself making more methods and making sure you run the right ones and the right functions, when what you really want is you want this code to be run anytime this single page is visited, regardless of whether it is running the view function or the update color function. Unfortunately, we have a way to do that. It's called onStart. This is an optional method you can define in your controller, and whatever you put in here will automatically run before, it will run the moment the controller is started. It will run before view, it'll run before update color. This is kind of similar to the construct method in the in just standard PHP object-oriented programming, but these controllers are sometimes constructed multiple times and get instantiated in weird spots. So we don't recommend you do this, although this will work. Construct isn't necessarily the best way to do this. Instead, you should run onStart. You can be sure that it will run one time the moment that the controller starts the rendering process. So now, if I come back to my favorite color, blue shows up. If I click save, blue is still there. Unfortunately, if I change this and hit save, blue shows up because onStart is running, even though I have posted different stuff in there. That's because my view is always showing the value of this favorite color, when in reality what we really want is we want to show favorite color if the form isn't being submitted. And if it is being submitted, we show the post. I'm sure you've seen code like this or written code like this all the time. Color equals favorite color if post color equals post color, and then you change out this data. While this will work, it's cumbersome, especially once you get to a form that has, you know, a half a dozen to a dozen fields. It's ugly. Fortunately, concrete5, we realized we had this problem too, and so what we include with the core are something called form helpers. And there's a lot of them. You can find some pretty extensive documentation in the developer docs, the helpers section of concrete5.org. What we're going to do is we're going to swap out. We're going to take this back to the way it was. Just remember the behavior that didn't work before. And we're going to swap out this text field with a text form helper. So the first thing we want to do is we want to load our form helper. That's what this is doing. Form is now, the form variable is now equal to the form helper object in concrete5. This is how all form helpers are loaded, or all helpers rather are loaded. Now I'm going to pass the form object into my view with the same variable name. And then, instead of this HTML here, I'm going to form text color favorite color. So the text method of the form helper creates an input tag with the type of text. The first parameter is its name. The second parameter is optional. It is the default value for this. So if I come back to my favorite color, you can see it looks the same. I've passed in favorite color, but if I change this out to something else and submit it, it's smart enough to retain the post. All that logic happens from within the form helper. There are methods for select, there are methods for radio buttons, there are methods for checkboxes, text areas, all basically every sort of major HTML form widget is supported within the form helper, and it'll make your life a lot easier. We even have one for submit. Although, if I'm looking at this, these are just about exactly the same character count. So before we actually get to updating the my favorite color for the logged in user account, does anyone have any questions? Joseph asks, is there a way to organize the view into separate files by task rather than having a huge if statement that covers every possible action? Not today, although there is a pull request that I'd love to take a look at. Basically, what it I believe would aim to let you do is let you render different. So the answer to this is yes. The problem is you'd have to create separate single pages. So if we look in the dashboard, you can kind of, oh geez. If we look in the dashboard, you can kind of see that we've done this with something like groups. So if you come to dashboard/users/groups, this is a list of groups, and then add group is actually a separate single page. And I believe we actually, so this is, we segmented out that way instead of using an if statement. But, that's not, and that does totally work, but it isn't as maintainable as having all of the, what it doesn't let you do is you have separate views, but you also have separate controllers at that point. And, you could create a base controller at one level and then load it up and then extend that controller from those subpages, but it doesn't happen automatically. There is a pull request that would allow you to render different views from within a controller, which we do some of, but I think it's fairly limited, and it's definitely not a use case that we actively test against today. So, there are ways to get around the sort of basic the if statement thing that you've seen here. There should be render support for something along the lines of something that looks like this. Without actually creating a single page for it. I believe that's how that pull request would solve that. So that support may be coming today. There are ways to get around it, but you can't quite do, I believe, what you're asking. But you could with a single page and controllers that are set up to extend each other. And moving right along, I'll go back to choose my favorite color. So at this point, I'd love to change my answer from red to blue. I've submitted it, but it's not actually saving anything. So let's make it save. If I want to actually set a user attribute on my user login object, what I want to do is I want to be able to easily grab the current user info object from within my update color function. onStart is running before update color, and this is already being instantiated. It seems like a waste for me to copy this code into update color, but I can just use regular PHP class stuff to do this. So now, every time I get to update color, my UI will be equal to the user info object here. So if this my UI instance of user info I'm going to just make sure that that works. So we are now successfully passing a user info object into update color. I want to change my attribute, and changing attributes from the user info object is very, very simple. You just use a function called set attribute. Favorite underscore color is the attribute handle, and then we just want to set it to be the value of post color, and concrete5 takes care of the rest. And at this point, we don't want to linger on update color because it's a post and that's generally bad practice. What we want to do is we want to redirect to my favorite color back here. So let's type in, let's come back to here. My favorite color is currently blue. If I want to change to green, it looks like it worked because I am still back. I'm back at my favorite color. I'm not lingering on update color, and green is showing up here. And if I look in my user list and I actually add favorite color to my columns, I can even see my favorite color from within the concrete5 interface. So that's another reason why attributes are so nice, is because they're standardized, and stuff like actually sorting by attributes works. You can actually search based on attributes, and you can set them programmatically really easily. One last little thing that's a little funky is, it would be awfully nice if I gave some feedback here. So I can save my form and it works, but it doesn't really look like much of anything is happening. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to redirect to my favorite color. I can pass a method to redirect as well, same way that URL works. So if I change this to red, you'll notice I have my favorite color, and the second parameter is color updated. And as you might imagine, this is just another method that I can use. I can pass a function or a variable called message into my view, and then from up here, I can check to see if it exists. Now I'm showing a message.